It may feel like a long time ago now, but just over a year ago, a bipartisan criminal justice reform was still very much a reality. And while there's no real substitute for a comprehensive reform in the long run, if we just sit it out until the opportunity for legislation rolls around again, we're only letting a broken justice system be the driver of racially biased sentencing. Now this is exactly where fair discretion could be an indispensable help. Right off the bat, let's just acknowledge that judges themselves get their inputs from a system that already suffers from bias at every one of its stages. Still, because they are the ultimate decision makers in a criminal case, regardless of the complexity that comes before them, any solution must necessarily revolve around the individual judge. What this tells us is that we can guide judicial discretion in a way so that we can put a check on racial bias. By collecting and analyzing sentencing track records for each individual judge, patterns of bias can be publicly exposed. A powerful social incentive to be sure. Yet we suddenly find ourselves in a delicate situation with a great responsibility on our hands. The question we can no longer here ignore is, what exactly do we mean by bias? How should we choose to measure bias? You see, for all our good intentions, a half-baked idea here could easily wind up being an attempt at bullying judges into conformity. What we want to achieve here instead is leave as much wiggle room as possible after squeezing bias out of the system. Turns out, there's a way to accomplish all this, but for that, we've got to redefine our most fundamental notion of bias. Once we start to view bias as a flaw in judicial self-consistency, we become able to tackle racial disparities while judges keep their entire freedoms to cultivate their own patterns of sentencing.